Thank you so much, everybody, for coming today. We are so blessed to have all of you here. I hope you're having a great time. We're here with the Horti-Culture crew, and they're going to go ahead and give a demo on how to cook some of these mushrooms so that you can better understand, like, it looks pretty. It looks like I could do something with it. I don't know what the heck is going on. And they're going to show you exactly what you can do so you can go and start making your own meals at home. Much love, y'all.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul. So, folks, one of the things I always hear constantly is, what do I do with this? Well, that's actually simpler to understand than the question is. So, really, you can do anything with a mushroom that you can do to an onion, a piece of meat, anything else that you have to have never been in a kitchen to not deal with them. And so I'm going to just go ahead and show you how easy some of this is. We're going to start off with our King Blue right here. So this guy here is just simple. Same as everybody else that basically grows mushrooms. You're going to have this little area on the back where we picked it off the block. That's the only area of this that you don't want to eat. The rest of it's all edible. One second. All right, so you can just do a little V cut to take it out. It won't actually hurt you if you did eat it. The thing being that I don't think that wood chips taste very good. Most people I've found have usually agreed with me. Most people. Then all I'm going to do is give this a quick rough chop. Bear with me, it is my first go at one of these.
Maybe that might be easier so people can maybe see what's happening. Okay. There you go.
I like that better too.
Hey, I'm trying, man. We're trying.
We all are.
Yeah. We're having fun.
No, is everybody else having fun? Because I know I am. That's what I'm talking about. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get our pan heated up here. All we're going to use to start out is oil. And here's the biggest thing with mushrooms. They love oil. Use plenty of oil. I'm using olive oil, but you can use bacon fat. You can use coconut oil. You can use whatever is going to give them the flavors you like or what you like to use at home or is good for your diet. It really doesn't matter. I have not found a wrong answer yet. But I know somebody will. Honestly, I don't know off the top of my head how many calories these really have, but at the same time, you're going to go and have a lot less calories than a piece of meat. You know, really. And they're saying you got to look at what kind of oil and seasonings, and really that is the truth of the matter, because the mushroom's not going to add the unhealthy parts to this meal. The unhealthy parts are what you add because you like it. In this case, yeah, butter's great, but it will make it unhealthy real fast. So in this case, we're keeping it simple. We're going to do olive oil. And then I'm just going to use some salt and pepper. And then I'm going to hit it with a little balsamic to glaze it at the end, which is what if you've come by our booth, that's what we've been doing with the mushrooms before putting them on a cracker with some garlic chev, which if you like that, it's on our Instagram, and it's super simple. But at this point, I'm just waiting for this pan to get hot. And also the fun part about this presentation is you get to come up and eat something. you could go a lot further in depth, you know, and definitely make them food processed or whatever. But at the same time, it's just not really necessary. You know, especially if you're just trying to go and get these out. Now, the one I really I'm gonna show you how to cook our chestnuts as well. I'm gonna say right now that these are not my ideal chestnuts for demonstrating, but we went through a lot of chestnuts, a lot more than I expected, so I kind of have what's left. But then at the same time, I'm going to show you how to do a lion's mane steak. And lion's mane steaks are super simple. Everybody's always intimidated by this mushroom. And I'm going to show you how to do it as a teriyaki glazed lion's mane steak, which you could just put over any fried rice or fried vegetable stir-fry mix or whatever. Super simple thing. It's actually, in my opinion, the easiest mushroom to cook. I wish this little electric heater was a little bit faster. It's not quite like the ones I have in the kitchen. Well, actually, does anybody have any questions for me while we're waiting on that to warm up? All right, so the question is that part I cut off the back, if I could go and still utilize it. And the answer is yes. Yes, I could. You know, granted, at the very smallest thing, I could feed it to my chickens or something else along this way. But if I wanted to use it in my own cooking, yes, I could still do that. Now, I could add it into a batch of stock, or something of this nature, broth, but I would still want to be using a fine enough strainer when I strain it out, so that way I don't have those little wood chips and soy hull pellets and oats getting into the rest of my stuff. Again, won't hurt you, just isn't the most wonderful. No problem. Do we have any other questions? Yes, ma'am. I actually really am happy you asked that. You will not get any. So the question was, does it lose health benefits when you cook it like other vegetables and other things? And the thing being that mushrooms are kind of a strange creature in that they go, maybe I needed to turn that on, that's why it wasn't warm. But but at the same time, here's the crazy thing about mushrooms. You really want to cook a mushroom to get the health benefits, unlike anything else. Because mushrooms in their cell wall contain chitin. Now, chitin, I don't know how many people know about this, but this is also one of the main things in a crustacean or insect's shell. And so it makes it hard. And so thus the cell wall of a mushroom is so dense that we don't have enough body heat to actually go and warm it up enough to get all those nutrients and all the good stuff out. So I always suggest that you should cook a mushroom for that reason, if nothing else. Also, a lot of these mushrooms really taste the same when you don't cook them. They're just so similar that it's like, why spend the money on this extra fancy mushroom when it's still going to taste like a button mushroom when you didn't cook it? You know, other than color maybe, which sometimes I get for the golds in a special salad. You better be charging those people enough. But otherwise, yeah, just go ahead and cook them, and that way you get all that health benefits and all the good stuff out of that mushroom. Do I have any other questions? Any other questions? Let's see if I'm hot now that I turned it on. And it was on low. I'm so sorry. I wish that this was going a little smoother for this part, but we were kind of running with our heads cut off all day, so. How long do mushrooms last in the fridge? All right, so He wanted to know how long mushrooms last in the fridge. And again, this is going to vary. Now, if we're going to go with the idea that these were freshly picked. And so just makes it easier. But in general, most of the time, you're going to get 7 to 10 days with an oyster mushroom. You're going to get right around 7 days with a chestnut mushroom. And I've found that they sometimes like to breathe a little bit more than the other varieties. Now, if you are talking lion's mane, I've gotten over a month before because it has an incredible shelf life. And the biggest thing for that one is you just got to watch this not turning brown, doesn't have a bad spot. And so that's almost the same for any mushroom because when one part goes bad, it'll push the rest of it bad really quick. Now, keep in mind, you can always cook them, put them in Tupperware, and use them for another week. So I basically grow wood-loving mushrooms. So that would be more of the shiitake, where portobellos are dirt lovers. And I tend to find that I enjoy the flavors you get out of shiitakes and other wood-loving mushrooms more than dirt-loving mushrooms. And so, yes, is the answer on that. But really, everybody, it's a matter of preference. You know, I like plenty of things other people don't like. It's hard to tell. Yes, ma'am. All right, so mushrooms do not like plastic, and that's a wonderful question right there. So whenever you get mushrooms, really, a lot of times how the stores sell them to you is not the best way to keep them and keep them for a long term. You want to go and put them in paper, and in general, normally folding over the top of a paper bag and putting them in your crisper if you have space is the best route. But if you don't have space in your crisper, they'll do perfectly fine in the fridge. I actually find that there's sometimes I can get way longer out of a bag of mushrooms in my fridge than I can from the box I have to store in my cold storage. There we go. I'm somewhat wondering if that plug's working. So the question I just got was, what do chestnut mushrooms taste like? And so a chestnut is actually very similar to a shiitake, where it has the same umami, earthy flavor that that shiitakes have. But the difference with them is that it actually has this really amazing nuttiness, as well as little sweetness on the back end. And also the other difference that I really like is that with shiitakes, the stems tend to be so fibrous you don't really want to eat them. So thus, you have so much waste. Where with the chestnuts, the stems aren't that fibrous. They're a little bit more than the caps, but not as bad as a shiitake. So I don't mind going and using them in my meals. If I really want them to be all the same, I'll just go and remove the caps from the stems and start the stems cooking sooner. All right, so right now all I've got here is some olive oil. We're gonna give these a good little sear. It's gonna take a moment because my thing's not heating up as fast as I would like. I don't know, we've been putting this thing through the ringer lately, trying to do all these different things. So the question I just got is, how long have I been cooking? And that's kind of a weird question because really started cooking when I was about 8. But I actually went and got my degree in culinary arts, and I have been a chef for different places and different things. I really just was wanting to do something where I could get out of the kitchen. And I also thought I would have nights and weekends. I was sorely mistaken. I do get more nights, no weekends. I saw a question back here. Over here. Where am I at? Okay. I don't try to dry them and then cook them because really that's more dehydrating or something like that, where I find that if I'm going to do anything to them otherwise, I'm going to go really at the point of dehydrating, you're going to go and then basically remove all that water, so you need to put it back when you use them again. Where with this, all I do if I'm trying to go and kind of get some extra moisture out to get them less rubbery, handy dandy other pan to push them down. Because really, that's one of the quickest ways to get a good sear on your mushrooms is just pressure. So the question is sauteed versus sear. So really that's kind of a question more of how firm do you like your mushroom, or how meaty do you like it to feel, to your mouth feel. So, you know, when you do, you can saute pretty light, and that's going to go and get the flavors in there. The mushroom's going to be cooked thoroughly enough for you to enjoy and everything else. But I personally like a sear to my mushroom a lot of times, especially when I'm talking about these lion's mane cakes. And the big reason for that is the more sear I got, the more it just has that mouthfeel of meat. And so it's a great substitute then for me, because I like meat. That's another good question. Honestly, I find that rinsing mushrooms, actually, I feel that they don't cook as well when they are rinsed. Now, the thing being, depending on what kind of mushrooms I'm getting and where they're coming from, is where I might rinse them. Especially when you're talking store-bought button mushrooms that they've been growing in dirt, God knows where and how, then yeah, I'll probably rinse them. A lot of times I'll actually rinse them and then leave them out so they can dry before use, or just put them back in storage after that so that I can come back to them later. With my mushrooms that I grow in my controlled environment, I know that there's no pesticides, no harmful things. So I'm not worried about rinsing them. I usually advise, if anything, to just go and take a paper towel and dab them off. That's actually a really good question. If you're putting it in liquid, then yes, that's not going to make a big difference at that point. It's mostly for if you're trying to saute or bake a mushroom, especially if you're trying to get that sear on the outside, that you don't want them real wet when you're popping them in there, because that just makes it a little harder to get it to that point that you're looking for there. That's what I'm here for. Don't be sorry. It kind of just is a preference thing there, especially depending on what I'm cooking. You know, if I'm going to throw them in a robo-coop, I don't really care which way they are. If I'm making like a douchon or something, but if I am doing a salad or something, with them, especially having them raw or just barely cooked, then I would prefer to get them whole and chop them myself. Because really, they'll oxidize some, especially buttons, some of these store ones. They oxidize, and so do even like these guys here. You know, now that I've cut them, it's actually letting some of those white areas turn yellow from the air. And so I think it's better to not have that happening for a longer period.
How hot should the pan be? Is it like piping hot, or is it?
I do. He asked how hot the pan should be. Right now, I'm trying to get this thing up in temperature to get the oil hot, but usually I'll keep my temperature right between medium and high for my cooking normally once I can get it up to scale.
Where do you buy these mushrooms? If not at the store.
So the best place to buy these is from us. And so I am with the Horti-Culture, which I felt you guys probably heard, but I can repeat right now because I've seen some people in and out. But yes, I'm with the Horti-Culture. We're located out of Snellville, but we do all the mushroom markets with these guys, which come next year, they'll be doing them here off at this Avondale, or this Wild Heaven instead of the Avondale Wild Heaven. You can also feel free to stop by our booth and grab a card so you can look us up online. We are happy to have people go and arrange orders from us that they can come out to the farm and pick up, which some people think it's just fun to come check out the farm even. But there's also plenty of other people around that you can get mushrooms from. And I'm not going to say that we're the only option. I'd rather people go and experience this and get the mushrooms in their hands than go and limit it to just myself. So if for some reason I know somebody that's near you or does something near you, I'll usually tell you. So just hit up a mushroom advocate or a grower. A lot of times we'll work together to make it happen. All right, so any more questions while I'm going? Right here.
Touching back on the idea of the sear, you're searing something like a steak. I think maybe it's called a Maillard reaction. The idea of building like a golden crust on the pan. How does that differ considerably when you're searing mushrooms versus like traditionally searing steak?
Well, not really, because it can do it just the same way. Now, the thing being that normally with a piece of meat, you know, because you can pressure a piece of meat to help get that sear and stuff. The biggest difference is that I feel that when I pressure a piece of meat, it pushes out a lot of those good juices inside that's going to keep it nice and juicy later on. Where that's not going to be the same thing for a mushroom, because the mushroom is just so much water weight that when you're doing this, pushing it down to get some out isn't going to hurt it. Yeah. So you can see, as I just was saying, I'm pressing these down. So that just is helping me speed this up a little bit and get that sear on there a little faster. Especially because it took a moment to figure out whether things were on or not. So, depends. She just asked what the best kind of pan to cook them with is, and it kind of depends to me. Like the lion's mane, and when I'm trying to cook that kind of like a steak, I do like to use my cast iron. But then when I'm trying to do a bunch of them for a saute thing or something, then I really do like to use a non-stick. Especially I would say the more fragile the mushroom is, the better it is to use a non-stick. But that also comes back to use plenty of oil. Otherwise, they will stick real bad. preference. It just really, I can push harder with that than most spatulas. So that's really probably the biggest reason I like to use the smaller pan. And essentially, you know, it kind of gets down on the edges a little better than I can with a spatula. I guess so. You guys probably have been watching. I've been having these in here for a moment now. It did take me a moment to get the heat up, but same time, I get this question a lot from people of, should you be concerned about overcooking a mushroom? Mushrooms can take a lot more cooking than most of your things, actually. I usually, if I'm doing meat with my thing, or like say a pasta dish or a stir fry or something like that, I normally will cook my mushrooms first and get them in the pan very first, because I find that, especially if you're trying to get that sear, it's best to start out with them and then move on to your other things. Because a lot of times they do take a while, especially if you have just a little hot plate like this. They didn't like me having the propane. Yes. All right. Question was, what am I looking for in a perfectly cooked mushroom? And that's something that will vary from mushroom to mushroom. Like the oysters here, I am looking for them to have that nice sear and be thoroughly done. The chestnuts, shiitake, stuff like this, I'm not usually trying to sear those as much, mainly because they have so much flavor to them already, and I'm not trying to go and overcook that flavor out. But then lion's mane, I'm always trying, that one's kind of a middle ground. I want that sear on the outside, but I'm not really looking to try to entirely dry it out in the middle. At least for most of the dishes you'll use lion's mane for. There is always an exception to the rule. And that comes back around kind of to the thing of they're wanting to cook them longer. But she was asking, is there any way to make a mushroom taste good on a grill? I actually love taking these King Blues. I'll give them about a half-hour marinade because they are sponges. So I'll do a half-hour marinade with them and some of my favorite ingredients and sauces and whatnot, then grill them. And that's how I get flavor into them that way. And if I was doing them on kebabs, I would definitely make just mushroom kebabs, then grill them a little before, so that way they can get enough char on them. And that, because, you know, really you want that char flavor from cooking on the grill. But yeah, and if you are trying to keep it vegan, you can always use vegetable stock as your marinade. Were you asking something?
Can you talk about the different kinds of oyster mushrooms, the textures?
I sure can. So she's asking about the different kind of oyster mushrooms and textures. And there's some variations in flavor at times, but in general, a lot of oysters are pretty much the same in flavor. Your biggest variation is the textures. And that's kind of from mushroom to mushroom. Like I have these pinks out here that they are just so brittle that I can't really keep them as a whole cap to try to cook them. I always advise people to look at it more like ground meat. And so I'll go and give them a rough chop after removing the one back part and just use them more as a ground meat, which I love using them for like tacos and different stuff. And then then with like these King Blues, pretty much all your blues and really thicker mushrooms, they're going to be great for sauteing. They have a nice pork to chicken texture when you do them right. And then like you got really, really light ones that are like the golds or our brown oysters that we have out there. And these guys are great if I can give them a little flash fry, use them for decoration, or even use them. Those are the ones that if I'm going to use raw in a salad or more towards the raw side, this is the ones I'm going to do it with. Was that enough for you? Because I'm trying to think of other things that I could tell you about that, but there's not much. All right, so I'm finally about getting to where these are pretty well cooked, at least for the first level of cooking, where they have a light cook, but still, you know, not a major sear to them, but enough of a cook that they would go and release the nutrients, be pretty good to deal with otherwise. So I'm just going to hold this up because I want to get them a little further. But that's what we're looking at. You can see that they still look pretty soft for the most part and are. But I'm going to try to push that a little further so we can get a good sear on them, and then we'll go and move on to some other varieties and do those while whoever wants can come up and grab a piece and try it. Yes, sir. Sorry, I couldn't hear you. I'm not sure. You're talking about the oil getting saturated into the mushrooms? It is a sponge, but at the same time, oil will burn away. And especially as I press them and that water combines with oil, you know, have you ever had a kitchen fire? All right, so you go and ever have a fire in your pan, do not throw water in there. It's going to make it worse. Use milk. But yeah, so it is a sponge, and that's a good thing because you want it to have enough oil in there that it keeps it from sticking and keeps it getting that sear. But at the same time, it's not going to just like be sopping wet with that oil because it wants to cook out still too. Now, if we get too scientific, you might go beyond what I know. The question is, do I have a favorite mushroom? And I have favorites, but for different reasons. I love our copperhead oyster because it is mainly all cap. And it's a nice middle-of-the-road mushroom that's versatile and I can keep in my kitchen to use whenever. I like lion's mane just because it's such a interesting mushroom to me, how it grows, how it looks, how you can deal with it. And even though it's scary, it's so easy to work with. And then the chestnuts are another favorite of mine, but that's because of the flavor profile there and the fact of them being more of a culinary delicacy for that reason. You know, because in the cooking world, yes, we want fun-looking things, but at the same time, flavor is number one. And so most chefs I know, at least for the higher end places, want to go with a mushroom that has a bunch of flavor to it already, not something that's just going to taste like whatever you add to it. So he's asking about truffle mushrooms and cooking, and there is times where you'd cook them, but you want to not cook a truffle mushroom really too much, because this one is more of an aphrodisiac and is there for its smells and flavors. Sure, you want to cook it some to release some of that, but I wouldn't want to cook it like I'm cooking this, because that would actually probably damage some of the flavor on that one to overcook. I wish I could tell you more, but we don't really have truffles around here, and I can't grow them. If I could, I would. Again, I usually will start my mushrooms before the onions because, like right now, I'm going to go ahead and start finishing these off because they're probably fine enough for most people and everything. But if I was cooking for myself, I'd let these keep going for a bit longer just to get that real nice sear on them and everything. But so with me, I usually will do my mushrooms first. But that's a preference thing. Again. So what I've added otherwise to this, other than the oil, was just salt and pepper. So we're not getting really crazy over here or anything. And all items were bought at Lidl, so you can do it pretty darn cheap too. Because I like saving money. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and call these as being, they're ready. Because I really want to get on to some of these other mushrooms, and I'm not sure exactly what we're doing for time. Okay, so it's going fast. We're going to go ahead and do lion's mane next then. And so you just noticed I poured these in this pan and then added the balsamic. That's partially because I'm trying to kind of keep some of the work done for cleaning up later easier. But you can just go and glaze them in your pan, and it'll actually kind of thicken that a little and make it a little bit more of a glaze on them. Anybody that would like to come up and grab a piece and try it, go for it. Oh, it's probably a little on the hot side.
Another question I want to, how do you know if it's fresh? Like,
All right.
you can tell the people.
Yeah, I'll tell everybody. So the gentleman just asked me how you know if lion's mane's fresh. And so one of the best ways to tell is the coloration. This is actually probably a day or two old. You can see by the yellowing it's starting to get. When it's fresh, it's pretty much pure white. And then at the same time, these will bruise. So every now and then you'll notice a little black spot here or there. It's not hurting it unless it's gone too far, and then it is hurting it because it's making it mushy. But at the same time, if you see a little bit here or there, that's perfectly normal. It's just how it works. Sorry, I didn't realize I should have brought napkins. I was trying to pull everything together fast. This guy here has got a little bit of browning to it, so we know it's a couple days old, but at the same time, perfectly fine. Really, the biggest thing with these is normally if they get too brown or black, no good. And there's sometimes actually, depending on how good your fridge or AC or whatever, works, or if you leave them out, they'll dry up before anything else.
So do you leave them in a plastic bag or not? Do you put them in a plastic bag?
I do not put any mushrooms in a plastic bag. Always paper bags for mushrooms, because and I'll store them in the fridge, because mushrooms don't like plastic, because there's so much moisture to them. It's okay. That happens. We could probably get that rinsed. Thank you. Hopefully I don't break this thing. So as you see, I just put the lion's mane in, and simply all I did there was push it down with this other pan. And so that's helping it make into a patty. There's a little piece. And so we're going to cook this for a bit, get a nice sear on the one side, and then we'll flip it. You can always, if you prefer to, you can season stuff beforehand. It's not going to hurt it. I just don't care to season my stuff beforehand personally, because of how mushrooms will cook down, and you tend to sometimes add too much salt or pepper when you look at it at first, and then all of a sudden you have this much less and you're going, oh, that was not good. Yes, ma'am.
When a mushroom's dried out, is it still viable for tinctures or for cooking?
She asked, when a mushroom's dried out, is it still viable for tinctures or for cooking? Now, if that mushroom has been dehydrated properly, then it can be reconstituted or ground into a powder for seasoning or tinctures or cooking or whatever things of that nature. Now, but again, it needs to be properly dried. If you have it where it just dried on a tree, I would not use that in cooking or tinctures or anything. I have some reishi around that I got that way. I only will use it as a table decoration. I will not go and ever advise anybody to put it into their mouth. Now, I am not a specialist on this, so there might be some other opinions from people that have a little bit more of a degree in this than I do. All right, she asked what the proper way to dry a mushroom is. You know, the best way to dry a mushroom is going to be using a dehydrator. But if you don't have a dehydrator, but you want to go and dry a mushroom, I've actually learned this from my mother, who did this, where she would put it in a paper bag on top of a fridge and let it dry out that way. It's, you know, again, I don't know if that is necessarily the best idea. That is not my scientific specialty. But I have found it seems to work. I would say, you know, as long as it looks pretty much fine, you're probably fine. But the thing being that at that point, for a lot of mushrooms, I wouldn't do it. And especially if it dries out in your fridge, it's not necessarily a good sign. That means that it basically had all the moisture pulled out of it. Because one fun thing that not everybody knows about fridges is that that's how they cool. They pull the moisture out of air. And that's what freezer burn is, when they pulled the moisture out of your food. But that's not any way that I would ever advise drying your mushrooms. On top of apparently works, but in, not so much. All right, so we're getting a nice little sear on the one side. I'm going to flip it, give it a little seasoning. And that's why I always tell everybody that this is one of my favorite ones to work with, because it is just this simple. It's like that other one, you saw how long that took me just to get a sear on it, but lion's mane, it tends to go pretty quickly, especially in a good cast iron. And you see how we're steaming here, so you do want to be careful during this part. Essentially, if I had a good rag, I'd be using that to help myself do this, but I have what they call chef hands from spending many years in a saute line, so I can take a little bit more than most. All right, so I just squeezed most of the water out of this. I'm gonna pretty much just now wait for that to go and dry up, cook up so it's not too moist and gets that sear on the other side. And then once I get to there, all I'm gonna do is pour some teriyaki into the pan here and deglaze and glaze it, and then that'll be done for that. We'll slice it up and see about letting you have a little try of that. Yes, at this point, once it has the sears, yeah, it will be cooked through and through, it's enough cooking to allow it to be for your body to do what it can with it and get all the nutrients out and all that good stuff. You're very welcome. I appreciate all the good questions from y'all, because they kind of just called me up and were like, "Will you do a cooking presentation?" It's like, well, I guess I can. I've cooked a lot of mushrooms. Yeah, and I actually love using wine with my mushrooms. Yeah, absolutely. Sherry, nice Sauvignon Blanc. And actually here, when I'm doing these, I don't mind doing a little red wine with my lion's mane at times, especially if I'm trying to go and shoot for more steak-like flavors. Use that. And the fun thing, too, is then it sometimes makes it look a little bit more like steak because it dyes it that red. It's just one of those cheat things. Actually, there's this video that's been circulating where somebody goes and takes some food coloring, which I hate to use food coloring in my food. But they use some red food coloring in their lion's mane before they cook it. But it is insane how much that thing looks like a piece of steak when they go and serve it up like that. Just gonna drain a little bit of this water so we can speed this up. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
How firm is that when it's finished?
You're going to have a seared outside like you would a normal piece of meat, but then it's going to have a nice tender inside. And so, why do people always call when I'm in the middle of these? It to me really does look like you took like a piece of pork loin and just sliced it on up or something. And we're almost done here, and then everybody can get a try. This is also why I kind of like having flames. Flames are just so much better for cooking off. Maybe next time I'll just hide the tank in here until... Yeah, Paul saw it because of course, we also brought a 20-pound propane tank, and he's like, I don't know about this. It's like, it's okay, Paul. He's like, gonna go and blow stuff up, it looks like. I'm like, we can do that too if you want. All right, so I'm almost there with this. Just taking a moment on this stupid little burner to get all that cooked off. Because as I was saying before, these mushrooms have an insane amount of water to them. And that's when they were like, are you going to be able to take an hour doing this? I'm like, just trying to cook the water out, yeah. Hopefully people have enough questions too, because I do appreciate everybody going and sticking around and hanging out for my burner working part.
So, not that you ever really have leftover, but if you have leftover cooked mushrooms, is there a best way to store them not bone?
Well, honestly, normally once they're cooked, you don't really have to worry about the plastic anymore. You know, it's more before they're cooked, just because then that goes in. The plastic just gives them a good realm for all that water in them to go and just be able to create bacteria and other stuff. That's a big reason why I don't like it. But after they're cooked, it's basically the same as any other food. You can go and store them in Tupperware, put them in a plastic bag. If you want to save them for later, sure, freeze them. I have learned recently that people are freezing mushrooms and keeping them really well. I never have been the biggest fan because I kind of feel like it makes my mushrooms a little slimier if I freeze them before they're cooked and defrost them. So normally if I'm going to go and try to store them for a long period, I will cook my mushrooms and then freeze them. And sometimes put them out on parchment paper so I could go and keep them from all sticking together. Especially because you come out and you're like, well, we're only cooking for 2 people. We don't need all that. I promise I will be done with this someday soon. Yes, ma'am.
I guess being that we're here in Atlanta, there's so many restaurants. Are there any out here that you can recommend that have a really good mushroom dish?
I love that question. Actually, I have to go and throw a little bit of credit to one of our biggest customers called Under the Cork Tree. They actually use our chestnuts in a large amount of their dishes, and they recently just did a duck one that I haven't had a chance to try yet, but I am dying to because it looks amazing. But they also, it's over, and Under the Cork Tree is about Roswell Road, right about where 285 and Roswell Road meet up. It's just off the exit, so it's easy to get to. I also have had a great risotto from Three Blind Mice that gets them from us. And I'm trying to give some credit to someone that doesn't get them from us. But to be honest, I haven't been out eating mushrooms out as much as I would like lately because I've been a little busy with business. Yep. But what one were you saying? And that's right across from the dairy place, right? Yes, and I think that they have an awesome chef over there. And one of the few times, La Samia, it's a vegan restaurant, and they do a lot of Lion's Mane dishes, and they work with so many mushrooms that you have a nice plethora of options to get there. How am I doing for time, folks? All right, so I'm going to just finish this off because this is right there, and then I'll cut it up, let y'all sample it as I get out of the way and make room for the next guy or girl. I don't know who's presenting after me. They might even be here. Is the next presenter here? Okay, at least. Oh, all right. I do know the next presenter. He does a great presentation too. I heard all about it from my partner. So I do definitely suggest sticking around for his presentation if you have the time. So again, thank you folks. I'm going to slice this up, pop it in this pan. And of course, big thanks to Atlanta Mushroom Festival, Paul, Dave, for putting this all together and having us out here.